Hello guys and welcome in. Today's video is going to be all about tanking in the Elder Scrolls Online, starting with the key jobs for a tank and breaking it down from there. With these videos, my goal is not to create an end-all be-all list of everything tanking. This is just going to be an introductory to the key features of being a tank in the Elder Scrolls Online, and also some unstated rules and common courtesies that you can do while tanking. Even if you don't plan on tanking yourself, knowing what your tanks have to try to keep up with and manage while doing their job can help you be a better teammate. But before we jump into it, if you haven't done so already, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you stay up to date on the latest notifications for more ESO content. With that, let's jump into it. One of the critical roles in group content is that of a tank. A tank's role is multifaceted, but we can break it down into 5 key steps. 1. The primary duty of a tank is to hold aggro of enemies through the use of a taunt. 2. A great tank knows that positioning is crucial. While this can seem chaotic, we'll be going over tips to manage this later on. 3. Tanks aren't just there to take hits. They can also play a crucial role in weakening enemies. Debuffing is a significant part of their job. 4. While tank focuses on controlling the battlefield, they also have an important responsibility to buff their teammates to enhance their damage output, healing received, and other valuable stats. And 5. Tanks must also look out for themselves. They use abilities and gear to increase their own survivability. Damage mitigation, self-healing, shields, all these tools help a tank withstand the relentless onslaught of enemies. One of the ways to improve your tank's survivability is with armor. Heavy armor is of course going to provide the highest armor rating, but there are additional passive benefits too, including passive damage reduction, passive physical and spell resistance, passive health recovery, passive resource regeneration, passive increased maxed health, and increased healing received. Another commonly missed way to improve your tank is with at least one piece of light and medium armor in your setup. The Undaunted passive kicks in, increasing your max health, magicka, and stamina by 2% for each type of armor, up to a maximum of 6%. So don't be afraid to try out other pieces of armor other than just heavy. When starting your tanking adventure, you will commonly see a sword and board used for one bar and an ice staff used for the other bar. Understanding the benefits of these two weapons can help you better use them. The sword and board setup provides significant advantages, including reduced cost of blocking, increased amount of damage that can be blocked, and also the skill line for the sword and board has a taunt skill that also applies an important debuff called Breach. The ice staff has its unique advantage over the other destruction staves, including reduced cost of blocking, increased amount of damage you can block, and also the skill line for destruction staff has a taunt skill that applies a useful debuff called Chilled. There's also the option for blocking to cost magicka if the destruction staff passive Trifocus is purchased. ESO offers remarkable flexibility, allowing players to shape their character with a wide range of skills and abilities. The wealth of choices can be overwhelming when deciding how to allocate 10 skill slots and 2 ultimate slots. Let's explore the crucial elements that every tank, regardless of class, should have. First would be taunts, then chaining abilities, a stun or snare, a self-healing skill, and for ultimate selection, prioritize ultimates that benefit the entire team. In the Elder Scrolls Online, taunting is fundamental for the tank's role. You can opt towards a powerful melee taunt like Puncture, which not only taunts but also debuffs your enemies. Alternatively, there are taunts such as Frost Clench or Inner Fire for enemies beyond your immediate reach. In the Elder Scrolls Online, tanks typically use chaining abilities, such as the skill Silverleash, that aid in drawing in smaller enemies who are not already grouped with the primary threat. This ensures better control of the battlefield. In the Elder Scrolls Online, tanks tend to use stuns or snares such as Dark Talons, Caltropes, or Gripping Shards. These abilities serve to slow down or immobilize enemies attempting to retreat, maintaining order and control in the midst of a battle. In ESO, tanks should have their own self-healing skill. While healers provide support, it's prudent to have a self-healing skill in your arsenal for those moments where you might be out of reach or just need some extra heals that the healer might not be able to shoot your way immediately. Consider abilities like Resolving Vigor or other options that focus on your personal resilience. This self-sustain can be a lifesaver in challenging situations when your healer is occupied elsewhere. In the Elder Scrolls Online, when tanks are selecting what ultimate to utilize, they should prioritize ultimates that benefit the entire team, such as Aggressive Warhorn. These abilities offer valuable buffs that enhance the overall performance of your group. In ESO, tanks need to taunt, and here are the skills in ESO that do just that. Pierce Armor is a melee sword and board skill that also provides a couple key debuffs. Frost Clench is a ranged frost staff skill that also applies the debuff Chill. Inner Fire and its morphs are ranged taunts located on the Undaunted skill line. In the Elder Scrolls Online, there are situational or soft taunts that were added in Update 37. These skills also provide a taunt so long as the enemy is not already taunted. Silverleash is a fighter skill that also pulls enemies in. Fiery Grip and its morphs, a Dragon Knight skill, pulls enemies in. Beckoning Armor is a Necromancer skill that additionally pulls in ranged enemies. Runic Jolt and its morphs are an Arcanist skill that provides a ranged taunt. In the Elder Scrolls Online, tanks not only need to pull aggro, but they also need to position enemies. Here are a couple of tips to help you with that. First, ensure that the enemy faces away from your team. Certain foes possess a frontal cleave attack that, although manageable for a tank, can prove disastrous for your more vulnerable teammates. Once in position, try to hold as still as possible unless mechanics require you to move. Excessive movement on the part of the tank complicates the tasks of the damage dealers and healers. This is because damage dealers often use area of effect damage, and unnecessary enemy displacement can reduce the group-wide damage output. Healers too rely on area of effect heals, and excess tank movement can disrupt their ability to effectively support the team's overall buffs via healing. In ESO, the role of a tank differs slightly from that in other games. Instead of focusing on dealing damage, ESO tanks primarily concentrate on debuffing enemies and buffing their fellow teammates. This unique approach, which incorporates gear sets, skills, passives, champion points, and various other details, showcases the true strength of a good tank. Such a tank excels in enhancing group damage more effectively compared to a flex tank, who attempts to balance their gear and skills between tanking and damage dealing. It's important to note that the damage output of a flex tank will considerably fall short to that of a dedicated damage dealer setup. However, the real power of a standard damage dealer setup can be further amplified through the proper support of a tank who applies debuffs to weaken the enemies, buffs to strengthen allies. This synergy between tank and damage dealer roles creates a dynamic and formidable combination that maximizes group damage potential. In group content in ESO, enemies usually come in large packs referred to as trash. There are a lot of them, and usually most are inconsequential, but if they are allowed to mob non-tank teammates, they can cause problems. There are multiple ways to manage trash pools. This is my strategy for managing them. 1. Be the first to engage the pack if you can. Lead with an AoE attack to start unless there are particular enemies that are more dangerous. Then lead with a direct taunt on that enemy. 2. Use some type of skill that either slows down, stuns, immobilizes, or snares the enemy. 3. Chain any remaining enemies to the center of your stack. 4. For any enemies that are still alive, apply additional buffs and debuffs. This basic strategy is a great start. A key note is that you don't have to taunt every little enemy. The goal is to get them grouped up so your team can kill them before they can hit anyone. In ESO, knowing the enemies and their attack patterns will serve you well as a tank. This can either come through reading guides or just experience. Outside of specific mechanics, a great feature to quickly identify an enemies is whether they are melee or ranged. Melee enemies with typically either no weapons or melee weapons such as daggers or two-handers, and ranged enemies will typically have either a bow or a staff. This is useful for stacking purposes, as ranged enemies will not come towards you when just range taunted, and sometimes even resist getting pulled into group. Therefore, tanks typically identify the ranged enemies, snare the ranged enemies, and pull the melee enemies on top of the ranged enemies for a cleaner stack. In ESO, battles seldom occur in barren landscapes. The set designers incorporate a diverse array of elements to enhance the visual appeal of the combat arenas. These elements can be strategically utilized if you grasp the concept of line of sight. In ESO, enemies aim to maintain a clear line of sight to their intended targets in order to land their attacks. Consequently, as a tank, you can provoke the attention of multiple enemies. Instead of attempting to draw them all to a single location, you can cleverly position yourself behind obstructions such as crates or trees, forcing the enemies to readjust their position to maintain visual contact with you. This tactic is particularly effective against foes that are challenging to relocate, such as archers or oversized creatures that cannot be easily pulled using chains. Feel free to experiment with this approach and identify the optimal positions for grouping various enemies. Mastering the best locations will require practice to determine what suits your style most effectively. In ESO group content, there's an unspoken rule that tanks should lead when initiating encounters. Just as there are overeager teammates who rush ahead of the tank and cause frustration, a tank moving at snail's pace can also be frustrating to the group. That's why it's crucial for tanks to maintain a reasonable pace between fights. Many damage dealers rely on stacking buffs or maintaining certain bonuses, which can lose efficiency if they remain out of combat for extended periods. A tank pausing to prepare with an extensive series of pre-buff skills can often be excessive in most situations. Now, I'm not suggesting that tanks should load up on swift jewelry or other movement speed buffs. What I am saying is that as a tank, you are essentially setting the pace for the entire group. When your group is courteous enough to let you initiate pulls, it's essential to not keep them waiting. Take the lead and jump into action. Your group will greatly appreciate the seamless flow of combat, and everyone can maximize their efficiency during encounters. When When you are in an encounter with multiple enemies to taunt, keeping track of taunts can be tricky. So let's cover an add-on free and add-on helped way of tracking taunts. Without any add-ons, the best way to keep track of taunted enemies is use the in-game timer on your taunt skill. Unfortunately, this will only help tell the amount of taunt left on the most recent taunted enemy, so we will have to use a bit of deduction. If we know that we taunted, say, 3 enemies, and we cast those taunts back to back, by the time we cast the third taunt, we know we have 12 seconds left on the first taunt. Therefore, when the timer starts getting down to, say, 5 seconds left, you should start refreshing the taunts on those 3 enemies again. With add-ons, I like to use the add-on Untaunted. This puts a bar with a countdown for every enemy I have taunted. This is easier for tracking, but does clutter up your screen, therefore some tweaking of the settings for size and color is needed to optimize this to your preference. In the Elder Scrolls Online, there is the concept called over-taunting, where an enemy can become immune to taunts and potentially target non-tank allies until a 15-second timer expires. Fortunately, the conditions required to trigger over-taunting are highly specific, making it unlikely to encounter. There are certainly multi-boss situations that call for tank swaps, so knowing how to avoid this mistake can be helpful. The prerequisites for over-taunting are as follows. There must be 2 tanks or teammates equipped with taunts. The target enemy needs to be taunted for a total of 5 times by both tanks within a 15-second window. This scenario is challenging to orchestrate and, moreover, inefficient in terms of resource utilization for one or both of the tanks. This is because each taunt ESO has a 15-second duration, rendering the repetition of taunts within such a short period of time unnecessary. In ESO, the most common buffs provided by tanks include Minor Courage, Major Force, and additional weapon and spell damage. The ESO Hub website offers a comprehensive resource for obtaining various buffs. The primary method for acquiring these buffs include using gear or skills. For instance, you can equip gear like Yulnakren for Minor Courage. The skill Warhorn provides Major Force, and sets like Pearlescent Ward or Powerful Assault can be used to further boost your weapon and spell damage. These buffs can be procured through a range of methods, so don't hesitate to experiment and discover what works best for your character. In ESO, tanks are expected to debuff enemies. The most common debuffs include Minor and Major Breach, Major Vulnerability, Armor Reduction, and Minor Brittle. The ESO Hub website serves as a comprehensive resource. Among the most frequently employed methods are the use of specific gear and skills. For example, you can utilize the skill Puncture to inflict breach. The gear Turning Tide applies Major Vulnerability. Tremor Scale is commonly used to reduce armor, and an Ice Staff with the skill Elemental Wall can be used to apply Minor Brittle. When starting tanking in the Elder Scrolls Online, every novice tank must familiarize themselves with the art of distinguishing between attacks to block, those to dodge, and those to endure head-on. This proficiency is curated through a process of trial and error, accumulating experience from encounters with each specific boss. However, I can offer some essential tips to assist you in your decision-making process. One is to identify channeled attacks. When facing a boss executing a channeled attack, pay attention to signs like noticeable wind-up, distinct animations, or visual effects. These are typically signals that you should consider blocking the impending assault. Consider dodging if the channeled attack not only exhibits the aforementioned cues, but also leaves an area of effect. hazard beneath your feet or necessitates movement for some other reason. A well-timed dodge roll can be effective in this choice. And overall, prioritize blocking, as blocking should be your initial choice because it consumes less stamina than roll dodging. Additionally, blocking helps maintain the boss's position more effectively compared to roll dodging. Blocking also offers a margin of error if your timing is slightly off. In the Elder Scrolls Online, a crucial aspect of tanking that many new tanks overlooked is the fact that while in the blocking stance, your stamina regeneration comes to a complete halt, irrespective of your buff food or potions that you consume. While you're in the blocking stance, passive stamina regeneration ceases entirely. This underscores the significance of a tank's ability to discern when to maintain a blocking posture, relying on their experience to judge when it's safe to execute a heavy attack with the sword and board or when to break block. These heavy attacks are the lifeblood of tanking as they restore stamina, which is used in both blocking and roll dodging, along with various skills. In conclusion, diving into the world of tanking in the Elder Scrolls Online opens up a whole new dimension of gameplay and strategy. As we've explored in this video, the role of a tank goes beyond simply absorbing damage. It's about controlling the battlefield and maximizing your team's overall effectiveness. Whether you're a seasoned tank looking for tips to refine your skills or a newcomer eager to embrace the role, understanding the intricacies of tanking will undoubtedly enhance your ESO experience. Remember, the journey to becoming a formidable tank is ongoing, filled with experimentation, learning, and adapting to the challenges that Tamriel throws your way. The ESO community is vast and supportive, so don't hesitate to seek advice, join discussions, and share your experiences with fellow adventurers. As you embark on your tanking adventures, keep in mind that versatility and communication are key. Stay vigilant, hone your skills, and most importantly, enjoy the rewarding feeling of being the stalwart guardian that stands between your group and the perils of Tamriel. May your armor be strong, your taunts be effective, and your adventures be epic. Happy tanking in the Elder Scrolls Online.